Hello, my name is Nike Natschke. I am an English teacher at Proviso West High School. I have been with the district for the past 13 years, and I've been teaching English for the past 16 years. I am currently teaching AP Literature, and I am also the Student Activities Coordinator for my building. Let us go ahead and dive into why we are here this morning. I'm going to go over some reading strategies that your high school kids can utilize in their classes. I'm going to go over close reading and annotations. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Give me a moment, please. So our goal as educators and as parents is to teach our children how to be an effective reader, right? And these are strategies that our kids can utilize in their classes in order to be an effective reader. I am sure that you're all familiar with close reading and annotations. I am sure you used it when you were in school as well. So this is more of a refresher course for you, and you can share those strategies with your kids. So what is close reading? Whenever I start my year with my kids, I always go over this first and foremost because it's a strategy that they need to use every day in class. Um, and I always start with this, right? Explication de text. And they always say, oh, Mrs. Natschke, what does that mean, right? What is explication de text? And explication de text loosely translate to, you know, examination of the text, right? That's what it translates to. So taking the text apart, looking at it closely, you know, developing an understanding of the text based on the small details and the larger ideas those details evoke or suggest. All right, so teaching our kids to do that. And I always have the discussion with my kids at school that, look, if you are in your biology class and you guys are about to study the anatomy of a frog, in order for you to fully understand the anatomy of a frog, you need to dissect that frog, right? You need to take it apart. So that is the way I explain close reading to my students, right? You have to take the text apart. You need to understand what the author is trying to say, what the author is trying to convey, right? And I let them know that through dissection, they will be able to understand how the writer uses various techniques to make a statement, to suggest an emotion or convey an idea. That is the only way they are going to be able to understand that. And I also tell them that, by doing that, right, it helps them analyze not only what a piece of literature means, but how that meaning comes about, because it is important to literature, it is important to what we read, and analyzing that text and writing a critical essay on that piece. It all matters, right? It all plays a factor in how we do the work. So let's keep going. So the keys to close reading, the first one is observation, right? And it all ties into annotation as well. So observation, which focuses on taking notes of what they've read and what they think about what it is that they're reading, asking questions while they're reading. These are important, right? So, you're sitting there, you're reading a piece of literature or a piece of nonfiction. There are thoughts and ideas going through your head. Again, these are things that I'll talk about again when we go over annotations. Um, and then when your kid has been assigned a text, a reading for their social studies class or for their English class, it's okay for them to read it more than once, right? They shouldn't just pick it up and read it once and put it aside. No, right? You want to encourage them that, to read it more than once. Maybe number one, the first time they read it for understanding, right? You can have them pick it up again and read it, for information or for dissection, for questions that may have popped into their head while they were reading. But they should always read a text more than once. And they want to pay close attention to what they notice each time they read, because every time we read something, we notice something different, something we did not pay attention to the first time we read it. So they want to pay close attention to what it is that they're reading or what it is that they're noticing the second time around. Again, the goal of this is to make our kids effective readers, either in their social studies class, their biology class, their science class, their physics, whatever the class may be, the English class, even math, right? We want them to be an effective reader, right? We want them to not just make assumptions about what it is that they're reading. We want them to be able to enjoy what they're reading as well, because I know that some of the challenges that our kids face, some of the challenges they face every day at school is, okay, or maybe in an English class, oh, I don't like that book. Why do I have to read that book? That book is boring, right? But we want them to enjoy the book that they're reading. And I tell my kids all the time that, look, you're not always going to enjoy the book that you've been given to read. But you have to make the best of it, right? You need to find the connection, because I am sure that there's something about a particular character in that book or in that text that speaks to you, that you can relate to. It's all about giving the book a chance, right? Effective readers, we want them to be able to participate in discussion, right? And the only way that they can participate in that discussion is by being an effective reader, that they are engaged in their reading. Um, the qualities of an effective reader, right? Again, our kids may be intimidated by what it is that they have to do. But we want to teach them that there is nothing to fear when it comes to reading, right? We want them to be able to plunge into the text that they're reading. We want them to be able to take risk with the interpretation of the text, right? I always tell my kids, because they always say, well, they're like, what do you think about it, Mrs. Natschke? And I always tell my kids, like, what I think doesn't really matter, right? Don't worry about what I think. Tell me, what do you think about it? Right? They shouldn't be afraid to take chances, because they're always afraid that, well, what if my answer is wrong? We want to teach our kids that, don't worry about your answer being wrong. Take chances. We all have to take chances in life. So you may as well start taking those chances now. So, I tell my kids, whatever they ask me, well, what do you think about it? And again, I tell them, well, what I think doesn't matter. What matters is, what do you think about it? Right? We want them to be able to state what they think about what it is that they've read, but not only state what they think about it, we want them to be able to support with evidence from the text, the claim that they're making about what they've read. right? And again, all this ties back into close reading, right? If you're going to, make a claim about certain things, you need to be able to back it up with evidence from the text, right? That's why in the previous slide I said, we don't want you to make assumptions, right? Make a statement, make a claim, then back it up with evidentiary support from the reading that supports it, right? We want them to be patient, right? Don't assume anything about the text. You know, you don't have to worry about liking or disliking the story. Like I mentioned before, they're not always going to like what it is that they've been assigned to read. It's okay. You tell them that you've gone through that as well as a student, right? That it's okay that, they don't like the reading material, but we want to encourage them to still do the reading effectively, right? Because again, when they go away to college, they're not going to have a choice in their reading selection, right? The professor is going to give them a list of reading materials. Like, here is your syllabus. Here are all the reading materials you need. Make sure you go to the bookstore, pick up all the items on the list, and be ready for class, right? That's the way college works. You don't get to select, well, I'm going to read this or I'm going to read that. No, I mean, those are things you can do leisurely on your own time, but not during your class time. So we want to start building this type of characters in our kids, that you're not always going to like what you're given, but you still need to do it anyway. You know, Attentiveness, right? They have to pay close attention to what they're reading. You know, what are they confused about? Where they get frustrated with the character or the author. And, I put in parentheses, I said, trust me, I have found myself in this predicament every time I read a novel where, I'm so frustrated with the novel that I'm like, oh, or I'm frustrated about a particular character and I just like fling the book, and I just walk away because I'm like, I need a break from this character. I can't deal with it. And then I go back to it because I want to know how the novel ends. Right. I tell my kids all the time that it's okay to be frustrated, with what it is that you're reading. Walk away from it and then come back to it later. Right. And stamina, right? When they read, right? They have to think hard and keep thinking about what it is that they're reading. So now annotations. Again, I talked about this earlier on. Annotations, right? Noting on the page words that strike you, phrases that confuse or thrill you, or places where you want to talk back to the speaker or narrator. Our kids always get confused when it comes to annotations. Our job as educators and parents is to try to show them what that looks like. When your child's teacher gives him or her an assignment that requires them to annotate, always double check their annotations, because what they tend to do is they'll take a highlighter or a pencil and they'll underline every single thing they see, right? Or they'll highlight every like passages. But what does that mean? What have the, if you pull your child aside and say, well, explain this to me, what does this mean? What does this yellow highlight mean? What does it symbolize? What does it mean? Most likely they're not going to be able to explain to you what it is that they've done. So I tell my kids all the time that when you annotate, again, this is your close reading, right? You're having a conversation with the text. You're having a discussion with the characters you have encountered in the reading. If it's nonfiction, you're having a conversation with the story, with the writer of the news article, right? You're wondering, You have questions about what it is that you're reading. Those are annotations. These are things that you want to write down while you're reading, right? The questions that are popping into your head about what you're reading, your thoughts, what you're wondering about, right? Those literary devices that you notice while you're reading, those similes, the metaphors, the personification, the hyperbole, all those things that you notice while you're reading, you want to mark them up. You want to pull them out, right? That's what annotation is. That's what it means to annotate while you're reading. I have a couple of student examples here to show you. So you can see in here, right, what one of my kiddos did at school, right? This is a poem, My Last Duchess, and they had to read and annotate it and pull out examples of literary devices. And you can see what she did, right? Yes, she used her highlighter, but then, with that, there are words next to them, and she put example of simile, making it seem as if, the woman cannot, come alive through the painting, symbolism, diction, what that means is, again, they have to write their thought, right? Hyperbole, she has a question mark next to hyperbole. Questions, thoughts that are going through your head. Right, the same thing here, the rhyme of the ancient mariner, right? You can see her thoughts or questions, what she's wondering about in the poem, right? We want our kids to do this while they're reading, rhetorical questions, comments, you are feel free, right? We want them to be engaged in the reading. So I tell my kids all the time, you don't have to agree with what it is that you're reading, right? Write down what you think, right? If you disagree with the author, please go ahead and write down that you disagree with what this author said and provide an explanation as to why you disagree with what it is that you just finished reading. It shows that you are engaged in the text. That's what that means. Again, another example of annotation. Again, you can see that her paper is completely marked up, right, with what she's thinking about regarding the poem. Because I could not wait for death, because I could not suffer death, right? You can see that she is, engaged in what she's doing. And her questions are there, her thoughts are there. And she wrote them all down, because that's what you're supposed to do when you are doing a closed reading of a text. And this is an example of annotations when it comes to a newspaper article. Again, it does not have to be a novel. It could be a newspaper article. I make when I had freshmen, I used to make them do a newspaper article every Monday, right? They have to read and dissect the newspaper article. They have to have a conversation with the assigned article. They have to write down thought-provoking questions and thought-provoking comments. And you can see on the sides, right, the students' questions and comments throughout the article. Again, we want them to be effective reader. And this is how to make our kids an effective reader. Thank you. I hope this was informative. Have a great day.